welcome to another WeAreDevelopers Live, where it's Wednesday again. We got nothing better to do than to take a look at a few links and tell you what we think about them, and you hopefully can learn something from it or get some inspiration from it. So Dan, how are you doing today?
Yeah, very well. Looking forward to this. I'm not going to keep the spoilers as they are spoilers and let you unveil the guests. But yeah, it's going to be a good one. We've got some good topics.
Yeah, we thought we're too well behaved. We're actually two nice guys, so we thought we'd get something rowdy in. And so without further ado, our guest today is Rowdy Abel from the Netherlands. And he's pretending he went to university because he's wearing another Cornell or USA, whatever that is. Oh, it's O'Neill. It's not even a university.
O'Neill, yeah, no. True. I never went to university, no.
Oh, me neither. Well, I went for parties and stuff, and that was basically it, but not to learn anything. And I gave a few lectures at the time, so that was really good. I remember one time I was at MIT and gave a lecture about accessibility, and I was completely chuffed and was texting my brother. And I'm like, I'm at MIT, this is amazing. And he was just texting back like, Mom said they're going to find out that you haven't been to university. And I'm like, I'm still allowed. Like, you know, they invited me. They wanted me to be here. So it was really bizarre. And I was in Stanford once, and that was great because my rental car was the cheapest car in the parking lot. But yeah, it was fascinating to see. So Rowdy, who are you and what do you do? Why did we get you?
The last question I can't answer for you, but hi, I'm Rowdy. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm from Gouda. I've been on the web since 1996. Back in the days with the dial-up modems and the time you could do view source and see what people did and learn from it. That's the way I learned my web development skills in the first part. And yeah, well, I'm a full-time, not a full-time, I'm a front-end focused DevOps engineer at a large Dutch insurance company, working mainly with Vue.js, Node, and Nest.js, so full JavaScript. And at some point, it's like, let's go and share my knowledge and go on stage. So that's where we met as well. Well, we three met at Halfstack again in October, of course. And yeah, it's good to see you again. It's fun.
You've been at the WeAreDevelopers Congress as well, both as a speaker and a moderator, as far as I understand it.
Yes, I've spoken at 2022 and 23, and 23 I was a moderator as well. Yeah.
Cool. So you're Correct. Back as moderator?
Sorry?
You'll be back as moderator this year?
I said yes, but I haven't heard from you, Chris. So
okay. Well, we're on. So how was the Super Bowl ad with the Gouda problem? How was that celebrated in your hometown? Was that a thing that the press was all over?
You know, Super Bowl, I like it. I didn't watch it because it's like 4 hours of middle of the night. But yeah, the Super Bowl and American football isn't that big in the Netherlands. So
no, there was
news about it.
There was a Google ad that had something to do with Gemini, and it did something wrong about Gouda, the cheese. That's why there was a thing there. So I thought that would have been covered. But
no, it wasn't picked up. No.
Too cheesy.
But if you're too cheesy. If you mess with Gouda cheese, yeah, we get you at some point.
Well, that's holds in your argument, but like I don't know. Well, I don't give a damn. So Dan, you were looking at Rowdy's talk at Halfstack. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I loved it. I actually got a little feature, to be honest. I was editing it and you asked, name a song that only has drums and there's no other instruments. And I shouted out, what did I shout out? It was a Queen song, We Are the Champions. I think it was, yeah. No, it was great because it was a really good blend. I mean, you can see, Rowdy, I'm into music as well. And it was really cool to see how you sort of explained the whole story of like, this was the idea. I had no idea what to do. Some of the things you were balancing of like not wanting to just pull in libraries for the sake of it, seeing what you could do yourself. And at the end of it, I'm now surprised, and we'll get to it later in the stream, that you've got a whole sort of suite of music kind of related products and projects. So yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm looking forward to kind of, you know, drilling into those a little bit later on.
Cool.
Yeah, it was good. So, it was, by the way, it was We Will Rock You.
Oh, it was. Yes, it was. Yeah, you're right. In fact, I'm going to blame that on the person who was next to me, because Chris, I remember we both shouted out Queen songs, didn't we? And I think you went for We Are the Champions and I went for We Will Rock You. But there you go. Yeah, it was great.
We Will Rock You was great to DJ at like company parties because you can make directors of companies just kneel on the floor and go like, doom, 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 and like idiots. Great. But without further ado, we've got lots of stuff to go through again. So I'm going to share my laptop here, and you can see that we have a lot of links again. We're going to send them out afterwards, so you can play with those as well. Or you can see the URL up here where you can say like devrel WeAreDevelopers.com, WeAreDevelopers Live, and the date of today. And these are the things that I collected that didn't make it to the newsletter and I thought would be worthwhile discussing anyways. So the first bit that we're talking about, and here's a new feature that we put in there. So to edit those later on, Dan has to do some editing and do some shorts out of those. We wanted to have like a feature where you can say like when we go into the next one. So we now have this feature in here where we can say like, okay, here's the next feature, and if Rowdy says something cool, we have a cool button as well. There's also a code pen if you want to play with that yourself. It's going to be very easy because CSS gives us these things. And talking about this, Interop 2025 is on. If you don't know what Interop is, it basically means that all the browser makers are arguing and discussing and giving in proposals what will be the next features of the web and how far they can actually be available across browsers. So one of the big things, it's quite a slew of things this year, but the big thing is anchor positioning, navigation API, which is better than like just a history API that we used to have, URL pattern to actually detect URLs and also to dissect URLs, because that's actually trickier than you might think. And same document view transitions, because view transitions are meant to actually just show a smooth transition from one document to another, but people wanted them in an SPA as well, because that way it's even smoother than that. I'm kind of confused about this. Rowdy, have you been playing with view transitions already? Because it feels like a cool, magical way to make things look smoother than they are.
I've dabbled a little bit with it, but not in production yet. No, it's something I want to deep dive in. Definitely, I think it has great opportunities to make things nicer as well. Definitely.
So Dan, you've been looking at anchor positioning for some fewer things, right? And you have an article coming out, as far as I understand it, as well.
Yeah, I've actually been looking mostly at the popover API, actually, but it's kind of in amongst some of these things that have become baseline. And what I found is that, and I'm just looking down the list now of the sort of focus areas of 2025 on that link, Chris. And there's some interesting ones, because it feels a little bit like there's this push and pull or tug of war that's happening between the world of the web and then these frameworks that have always found very hacky ways of doing things. And actually, I found particularly there's very little good practice and best practice in the world of kind of frameworks, or at least it's harder to find that best practice. And so it feels like some of these are actually going to make a bit of a save for that, in terms of rather than us falling into a world of even fewer best practices, we can accommodate some of these things, and then we won't need to do the hacky things with frameworks. At least that's what I get. But Rowdy, when you look at it, do you feel the same, or is this is there another reason that this has happened?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that this is happening, because I don't want to go back to the 90s where you had to do something for IE4 and I don't know, Netscape 5 and whatever. So it's good that they align together. I really like that. You were talking about anchoring position. For me, that's a little bit too little too late, I must say, because in our portal, we had a lot of popovers using Popo.js with a lot of terrible experiences with it, especially on mobile. So we just totally went away from popovers and just used either the dialog, so have a model with the dialog element, or use sidebars. Just open a sidebar, because that's way easier to read than those little pop-ups.
I remember YUI, when I worked on it, the Yahoo User Interface Library had that positioning as well, where we had like top left, right, left. And I think the interesting bit is that CSS in the last years has given up on the idea of like the clockwise from top thing, because we have to support text that goes top to bottom and text that goes right to left as well. So it always feels like that was a weird thing to do. So it's now always like box and inline and these kind of things. So that makes it harder to actually implement these things. It would be interesting to see, because otherwise we always had to do like a recognize where on the screen it is, if it's even visible on the screen, if it's part of the scroll, if it's part of a scrolling element, or if it's part of the main body element. So there was a lot of like polling and testing we had to do, and that was sometimes really, really slow. So you even had to like give it like a 20 millisecond timeout and these kind of things, the throttling. So it's great that these things come into the platform now. And I think interop is just something that everybody should be looking at, because we have a say in these things. We have a say as developers what browsers should be supporting next. And this is where all the browser makers are going full in on like outreach and letting people talk to them. So you learn who's actually behind these different platforms, behind these different proposals. So it's a bit like voting. Hello, fellow Germans, please on Sunday go vote. And that's basically the same thing there. So interop is happening, and there's lots of cool stuff in the making. The question is though, like we already pointed that out to a degree, people starting with Tailwind and starting with frameworks, will they even touch these things? I think there is a massive delay in innovating it and making it baseline, and then people seeing it in the wild. Not because people don't trust it to be supported, but they actually rely on frameworks more. This feels kind of disappointing, doesn't it, Rowdy? Because we are always like waiting for things to happen and then immediately put polyfills in and tried things out. But now there's even a bigger delay because of frameworks.
Yeah, it's a shame. And you're talking about Tailwind, and it's no. For me, it's like just one big vomit of utility classes. I like utility classes, but having 20 classes on an element, that doesn't really make sense to me. Yeah, I remember back in the days when we didn't have rounded corners, for instance. We had our solutions for that, and we didn't need a big framework and stuff like that. It's a shame, yeah, and also I like to educate people a little bit more to use what's on the web and not just grab something out of the library and throw more JavaScript to it. So it's a shame that it's falling behind a little bit, but I'm very happy that they work together, the browser vendors, to get things working for everybody in the same way in every browser.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to criticize these things, but having worked on standards, it's really, really hard to make a standard that works for everybody. Like there's so much thought going into it, so it's really, really important to understand how much work is behind that as well, and not just saying like, why did you do it like jQuery? Because then 15 years later, it doesn't work in jQuery anymore. Style Observer. JavaScript to observe CSS property changes. That's by Leah Veru and Dimitri, forgot his name right now. That seems to be a really, really cool thing that people are getting very excited about. Is this something that you could think of using in day-to-day life, or is it something that feels like an edge case to you, Rowdy?
Well, I was looking into this, and if it's from Leah, usually it's great stuff because she's awesome. But I was really thinking about what's my use case here. I don't know if you have any ideas on this, but I couldn't find one actually.
Well, I mean, there's basically it's a changing of when things change that you can interact with it. So basically, normally when I do something like that, I also fire a custom event. But it isn't necessary to fire a custom event anymore when you have something like that. So any change in a component that would happen, you could get you could actually interact with, and you don't need to poll constantly if there was a change in it. So I think that's a performance boon that helps with that. But yeah, people are pretty excited what's there. I haven't found a use case in my case as well yet, but it's basically because I'm probably not doing the really cool stuff that they're doing. Maybe we should talk to Bramus or some people like that.
Yeah,
who actually are more into the depth of CSS. Have you seen something where that would be useful more than just looking into like the mutation observer of the DOM?
Yeah, no, I think it's really specific ones. I mean, I can think of a use case perhaps where I would use it, and a lot of my kind of sites have got a lot of these kind of theming, and the user selecting their own theme and then it kind of adjusting CSS variables and things like this. So I could see maybe there would be some way when I start playing with it and I can understand maybe more about what it can do. But yeah, at the moment it feels like, because at the bottom of the article it lists, there's still a number of bugs and it's still not perfect. It's something that I think we get it every now and then, don't we, on these live streams where we see something that we go immediately, oh, that's really exciting. And then we go, oh, I don't really know why, though. I'll give it 6 months and we'll revisit it. So maybe that's the best way to do it, see what we can do with it.
Maybe we should just get Leah in and let her explain it to us in a short manner. I love that also, like that the way she's been changing now with being a mom and bringing her kid to the CSS working group meetups and stuff. It was just really, really beautiful to see how these things happen. I mean, I can't even imagine what that life is like. Like basically her and her husband being an SVG expert. I mean, I had that at one time where I sent my girlfriend canvas animations rather than like love letters, but I guess that's similar in their case. So geek on geek in one relationship is an interesting mix, I think. That was interesting. A calculator app, anybody can build that. So basically, it goes in all ad nauseum and detail about what building a calculator is like and what to do with it. And I find that fascinating because one of the story that I have with that is that when we did Firefox OS, the calculator app was one of the bigger things to build as well, because it turned out to be quite a security problem. Because when you can do calculations, you actually, when you just use it with an eval in JavaScript, you could inject all kind of stuff in the calculator. So that was something I had not thought of. Like it's really bizarre. And then you got all the floating point problems of JavaScript that basically 0.2 plus 0.1 is 0.0000 something. So you have to think about all these things. So I love when somebody just takes something as obvious as that and then just goes into all details that there are. Have you ever written a calculator?
Well, not a calculator, but I've written a calculation program where we would make calculations about pensions, stuff like that. But yeah, running into those floating point errors and it was a disaster. You had to round stuff all the time because otherwise it would be really weird. So we stopped that and we just let some other language do that. But I was reading this article and halfway through, I was like, this is way above my math skills. This is incredible. But kudos, really.
Yeah, math.
I'm glad you said it.
Yeah.
I think Chris, you're probably the only one here with the math skills. To actually, I'm glad you said that, Rowdy, because I was definitely feeling that my brain was way too small for this. But it is fascinating. It is a really, there's more like, not quite philosophy, it is maths, isn't it? But there's more when he's listing these kind of concepts at the bottom, again, way beyond my understanding. Chris, you probably understand them. But when he's linking to these Wikipedia pages and saying, but then this is this kind of specific quirk of maths and how it appears in coding, just think, I would almost give up. I don't know why you'd want to tackle that. That's such a headache. You really got to love maths to want to do that, I think.
And too much spare time, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that good either. I mean, I was very lucky that I actually had access to computers in my school, and basically all my math homework, I wrote a program to do it for me, and then I donated it to the school library, and I got a good mark because of that. So I actually got rid of math at the 10th form, I think, and then my final A levels were German history, English, and astrophysics. So I had nothing to do with math any longer. And so it was just, because I was, even then, I'm like, why would I do repetitive, boring things as a human? I got a computer to do that for me. Like, that's probably, but I know people who went to like Waldorf schools and stuff, and they teach math as a philosophy rather than as a science. And they came up with the most amazing solutions to problems. We had one guy that just then came to our normal school, and whenever he put his arm up and said, like, I have a question, we know we could Skype off the rest of the class, because he would just have a philosophical discussion with the teacher for the next 20 minutes about some math things. So that was quite fun. But yeah, it's something that sounds like an interview question. Can you write a calculator app? But there's so much getting into it.
But the answer should be no then, right?
Yeah, I guess that's what you want to do. Like, if you just do plus and minus, it's easier. But as soon as you get into like all the numbers that could be there, then you have a different issue altogether to deal with. So yeah, calculators, if you have fun with it, then have fun with it. Let's have the next bit. We had last week, we had Salma here, and she wrote this talk, this blog post, which I found weird because I wrote a kind of similar blog post a few months ago about a copy code snippet button and why it matters. Because she had like problems holding using her hands, so she couldn't highlight things, and the copy button next to each of the code embeds that you do in your blog seems to be a really good thing. Yeah, I think so too. One of the problems that I found, of course, is that also when you look at the APIs, the pasteboard API that we have and the asynchronous ones that we have right now, it seems over-architected, but the problem is that it's a security problem. Like I could inject malware into your pasteboard without you realizing it, and then when you actually put it in somewhere else, it could execute. You know, that's where there's a lot of filtering has to go on, or a lot of like it has to be on an HTTPS connection to actually allow for that, and you have to protect the end user from making mistakes themselves. So. But I really like that write-up. So Dan, you've been looking through it, I guess, or I mean, I love the way she explains bits here.
Yeah, and actually, it shows you quite how it's almost impossible, right, to navigate the full web in the way that you would be able to if you weren't using a screen reader or using some assistive technology. Because she's mentioning throughout it that like this is an issue, this was an issue, and actually there's actually an issue with almost every single part of navigating the web. And then when you get to, if you think about writing code as it is, it's such a sort of, I don't know what the word would be, but like fiddly. You only need to get one thing wrong, hold shift when you didn't mean to, or the opposite, and then the code doesn't make sense, you get the red lines, etc. Imagine that you've written a load of code and you've got a little squiggly red line where you should have had an angled bracket and you've got a bracket, and you just want to change that. It sounds absolutely unimaginably frustrating to just do that. And so having that simple copy button may not sound like a lot. Just check that it works, because I always want to see that the irony isn't there, of the copy button not working. But yeah, I think it's more about the minor thing of a copy button is actually a major thing when you're using this, and almost every single minor element is quite major when you're using a screen reader or assistive technology. That's what I've learned from it. It's a really good article.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. And also, I would say you have to have that copy button everywhere, because I've copied code from I don't know, Stack Overflow or something, or other places, and they had line numbers in front of it, and if you select it, you get the line numbers as well. That's very annoying.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a great solution, and it's one of the things I'm covering in a new talk about Project Fugu as well, like the clipboard API. That's one of them. Just those little things help people a lot. It makes a better usability of your website or your blog or whatever.
One thing I put in my article as well, which she didn't do, is a UX item that I think is important, that actually gives you a feedback that it was copied. Because,
yeah.
I mean, here you just got the outline, but for example, when it comes to the little tool that I've written for myself to actually turn links to Markdown. So if you just do something like that here, that we're using that one internally, and you convert it, and when you go on the copy thing here, it actually gives you that little checkbox to say like, okay, it actually copied it now, and then it goes away after a second. And I think that, I mean, this is a bad example because I'm actually covering it most of the time, not seeing it. But like giving feedback that something was copied, I think is very, very important in this case as well in terms of UX. Because people then would not click it like 15 times and wonder why it doesn't work.
Yeah, the only downside on your solution, Chris, is that it's more like a toast message. So it goes away. So if for accessibility, it's not that great. You should have there a live region or something like saying, hey, it's copied.
I'm using the title as well. I'm using the Windows status, which actually is a hidden live region, which many people forget about. So that one still exists. Because I remember Windows status, like in Internet Explorer 6, you had like little scroll things on the bottom of the page. Like down here, we actually had the status bar was always visible. So we wrote like little JavaScripts to have like marquee messages in the status.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, true.
And apparently changing the title and changing the status of the window actually fires in older screen readers as well. I don't know if it actually does with the newer ones. It would be fun to see that, because that would prevent people from having to use area live regions everywhere.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, cool.
It's an interesting one, yeah. Create a React app. We talked about this in the newsletters a few newsletters ago, that create React app was basically a security problem and a performance problem because it was not maintained by anybody. So now the React team seem to have said like, okay, React is a framework. If you want to start with React, you have to start with a framework. You cannot just build a small React app on your command line. Or have I misunderstood that?
I think that's basically it, from what I understood. I mean, I kind of understand the reasons for it to some degree, in that, you know, when I first started using React, I immediately found it quite frustrating because you sort of are locked into this. You have to use all kinds of, I think there's like a library to use for routing, and that might have changed now, but it was pretty much a difficult thing to create more than one page, right? And I get single page application kind of as the idea, but it wasn't very easy to do really much beyond just creating a page with something on it. It was almost like as soon as you wanted to use any kind of API call or anything like this, you kind of gravitate towards Next because it would have that rolled in. So it seems like they've just gone, right, we're going to give up on trying to work alongside these frameworks when most people are just using the frameworks anyway. That's my understanding.
Yeah, I kind of hate it that they deprecating it. Because if you look at the Vue, for instance, React, I only use that for some demos. And then it's fine. I don't have all the routing and stuff like that. But if you look at Vue, you just get a nice command line interface. Like, hey, do you want Vite? Do you want ESLint? Do you want a router and stuff like that? That really helps people that are new to web development and maybe new to the library or framework, depending on how you see it. Make it way easier to start with it instead of like, hey, this is a library and just get a framework somewhere and figure it out yourself.
Yeah, I remember the first one to do that kind of interface on the command line was Yeoman. Remember the Adios Money thing that basically was right after some other bundlers that we had before. I think the UX of like a wizard on the command line to actually allow you to pull things in with yes and no, that's a completely different art that came around just lately in the JavaScript world. In the Bash world and stuff, it was very common to do that. But it feels like it makes me wonder what React is trying to do here. It's like, the argument that I saw as well was that people say like, you shouldn't build apps the way you did with Create React App. You should always use like a proper router. You should do like all kind of like do your own redirection kind of stuff. So it feels to me, it's going full circle. I didn't like C# and .NET when I had to work on it. Mind you, there was .NET 1 with like view state still a thing and these kind of things. But it always felt so like overwhelming. I was just looking at it and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot get a Hello World together without like having 60 different bundles, things happening. And then JavaScript came around and we said like, hey, we're going to be much more nimble and we're going to be much more things. And now the big players of JavaScript are basically all going all in a direction that feels like new packages or like a Peckle in Perl back in the day. So it feels like I always want to challenge that argument that says like professional development means you have to use a framework.
Bullshit.
I don't know.
Sorry. Sorry. No.
Is it something that you've encountered as well? Do you feel bad for not knowing about these frameworks? Do you feel FOMO in these things, or?
Well, it's for me, it's like use the right tool for the right job. Like we stick to Vue for the front end because it's lightweight and it does what we want. We looked at Angular as well, but that, you get a whole apartment building while you want to have a house, for instance, like it's that big. But for other projects I'm building myself or little demos and stuff like that, I might go to a static site generator like 11t, for instance, and just write a little bit of JavaScript to render HTML and maybe have a little bit of JavaScript on top of it. I could easily also build websites with a PHP CMS that has templates and generates stuff. It's like, it's nowadays where I see a lot of young developers saying, we have to build this. Let's use React. Why? Because I love your React. It's like, that's not the right answer to it. It's like, if it's the hammer stuff, right? If you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Or a thumb.
That's a shame. Or a thumb, yeah.
I think Rowdy, you made a really good point though about people that are new to it not really getting into it, and I think what it does is it actually clouds it clouds the water or muddies the water a little bit in terms of somebody that's picking it up. And I've been through that. You almost like peel back the layers. You go, okay, there's JavaScript here, right? Okay, and then I can with that learn React, and with that I can learn Next, and with that I can learn, and you kind of keep peeling back the layers. And by just saying skip React, go straight to Next, you then don't differentiate which parts of that are React and which parts are Next, because that was another learning curve. Everyone's saying Next is good for routing, and you're saying, what's that? So you see what I mean? You have to kind of understand each layer before you go to the next one. So I think there is a really good point about people that are new to it are just going to skip React, and they're having to go straight in with the sort of headache for a newbie of learning a big framework.
Yeah, and the first layer should always be HTML, in my point. And I see a lot of developers don't have a clue about HTML. It's like everything is a div or whatever. Oh, I should use a section now. Everything is a section, or I don't know. That's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the other day there was this post as well that was saying like, what was it, like that writing HTML by hand is stupid. You just use a page, use Markdown and a generator, because writing a blog in HTML is stupid. And I totally agree. I've never seen anybody write their blog in HTML. We write templates for a blogging system, or we write templates for Eleventy or Ghost or whatever you're using. The whole idea of people thinking there's people out there that write their blog as HTML. I mean, David DeSandro, the designer at one time did that. He had a different layout for every blog post where he actually showed off his skills as a designer as well. But he did one a month. So that was basically a thing. But the argument that people get always like overexcited that they're saying HTML is not effective because people are writing it by hand, I think that has been out of the window since we had SHTML in like 1997. I remember the BBC webpage used server-side HTML at one time. So basically, it was just a very interesting Apache thing, and that gave you.
I've done it myself as well. Yeah.
So yeah, it feels weird that people criticize HTML without ever knowing that people are not actually building full pages in HTML. That's just. I mean, you had snippets in Dreamweaver to work around that kind of stuff. So it feels a very strange criticism. So when he said like, oh, no, the argument was like writing HTML is so slow, you should just use a page builder. And I'm like, yeah, much like cooking is slower than ordering a burger. But you know the ingredients then, and you know what's coming into your body. And that's the difference there. So I think that's where people don't understand that. If you don't know what you're actually putting together in the bowl, you might get something that upsets the stomachs of your users. So, as we've written that analogy into the ground, it was weird. Boring tech is mature, not old. Now, as we all three are old, boring, and mature, what do you think of that one?
I think a great example is at an insurance company I work for. Is like we started in maybe the late 60s or early 70s with COBOL. All the backend systems were COBOL. And at some point, things need to be replaced with SAP systems. But those COBOL systems were still running into somewhere in the 2000s. Maybe some are still running. That's cool. Maybe it's boring, but it's stable, it's working. And why should you change everything all the time? I don't see the point in that.
I mean, there are things that a year ago I had the inventor of curl on a Coffee with Developers, who's also a friend of mine, and I think those are the things that just don't change because they were built the way they were. The same with Unix, having like one command doing one thing rather than just all the things. So that I think that's where that comes into a degree, like that the boring tech is there because it actually works and you don't have to think about it because it's just so. It proved its worth, and actually it made things easier. That said, going into COBOL or Fortran now is probably a good thing because all the people that actually worked on these languages are now getting retired. And
Yep.
it's actually, you can charge whatever per hour because banks and insurance companies are very much desperate to find people to know these things. It makes you wonder, when is a technology becoming mature and boring?
I wonder if some of it is just like just talk, because when you said old, I actually didn't go to COBOL and things like that. I went to things like PHP because of the just the talk, you know. And it's almost like, because yes, it's in WordPress, you either love it or you hate it. And so then if you think WordPress is old and clunky, then you think PHP is old and clunky. And a lot of it is just like we would use the word banter in the UK, right? It's like joking, it's ribbing, it's prodding each other. But actually, PHP runs most of the web. We've talked to Chris, you've shown me, in fact, where things that have got full libraries in other languages are just built-in methods in PHP. And that goes completely against the image that PHP has of everyone. You almost think of it, and I don't know PHP, so I think of it as a little bit like, oh, everything's awkward, it's really verbose, you can't read it, it's too many question marks everywhere, etc. But it actually is just a really well supported language, and there's a reason why it is where it is. So yeah, I agree with the title, really.
This is just a quick one. There's quite a few regular expression generators now that use AI to allow you to write regular expressions with English rather than just having to write regex yourself. I think that's cool. There's people are not good at writing regex and sometimes write them too either not finding the things or actually too slow. So it's interesting to actually have these kind of abstractions. But what is your thinking about regular expressions? Is it something you have to do and you have to understand, or is it something you try to avoid if you can?
The last one, I try to avoid it. I really suck at it. I know what I want, but then how do I write this? So I looked at these both of these, and this is like, okay, this is giving me the attention and what I want, and then I get a regex out of it. That's great. Same with the we had like the interrupt we had there, the URL pattern. You can use regex there as well. It's like, oh shit, how does that work? So this would really help me, but I try to avoid it if it's possible. I remember writing some regex for validating email addresses and stuff like that. But fortunately, for instance, I think in PHP, you have methods for that do that for you. So yeah, if you can avoid it, I would really avoid it. Because if you look at other people's regex, like what?
There is an official regex to actually validate emails, and it is a full page. It's basically, it's ridiculous. It's really interesting. I think it's a powerful thing. When I wrote my JavaScript book, I spent more time on the regex chapter than all the others, because trying to explain to people what it does, when you know it, it's really hard. You know, like it's like muscle memory. You don't think about it anymore, but explaining to others why it works that way is really the tough one.
Yeah, I saw the book. I went back and I saw the book from 2006, Mastering Regular Expressions, 515 pages. It's like, no, no.
So popover API is now baseline. Dan, you looked a bit into that, and I guess Rowdy, you've used that one as well. It just is nothing new, but it's now available. So that's a really cool thing. So we don't.
They made a mistake, right?
it.
Rather than drilling it, rather than drilling into sort of what it all is, I think it was sort of the story as well was to do with they had announced that it was baseline, I think last April or something, and that actually it wasn't. And so they've sort of had to do this article saying, sorry, it's kind of, because I'm sure there would have been developers using it going, it's baseline, but it's not working. What's happening? So yeah.
And this is interesting, just a side thing. The UK government actually gave out a guideline about like how to securely dispose of storage media, and how to actually, what you need to do before you throw away your hard drive and stuff. But it goes really into details. I kind of like that, because it feels like it should be just simple to destroy these things, but it's not. They're actually more hardy than you think they are.
Yeah. I used to use a bucket of water, a hammer, and a chisel, and hope for the best. That's what I did back in the day with my hard drives.
Yeah, I remember at the times of floppy disks, friends of mine, acquaintances of mine, people I hardly knew, were into pirating, and they had their floppy disks on top of a massive electric magnet. So if the police would come to their house, they just switch on the thing and basically erase all the floppy disks on top of it.
So good.
I always wondered if that
Brilliant.
was a myth of it really worked for some of them. But yeah, it's interesting how hard it is to get rid of data in a hard drive. I mean, there used to be tools like autoclave, which allowed you to really delete the things in there. It took ages to do. It's interesting to see what you don't want people to find out any longer afterwards.
Yeah, the article says about when it's encrypted, then it's easy to clean it. But I hope that's true.
I mean, I always wonder about this when we watch telly and we watch like these programs where like people got killed and they got into their house and nobody uses a bloody password on their computers in those shows. And I mean, do people not do that? I mean, I saw that like about 60% of people use one number pins, like 111112222 and these kind of things. I mean, are people that lazy, or is it just a thing that you don't? I mean, I have everything password protected that I have and different passwords for everything. Am I just paranoid, or is it the same for you?
I have a password that I regularly use for a lot of stuff. But lately, I'm just, if I'm logging into a website or something like that, I have Mac password, just generate one for me and save it. That's fine. But yeah, I think I have a few that are the same everywhere.
I used to just take it from the book that I'm reading at the moment and just random letters from different pages. And like then when I get the next book, I change it to the next password. But that felt a bit over the top. And I think there's so many things you do right now with two-factor authentication anyways. Like it's not necessary to know your passwords any longer. I think that's already a sign that if you can remember your password, it's not safe. This is just a cookie consent plugin written in plain JavaScript, which what I find interesting here is like the plain JavaScript, like, yeah, this is basically a popover, right? Like this is like it should be very easy to do these things these days, but people are like, oh, we're not using WebAssembly to do. I found that kind of a weird marketing-y thing, but it's a good thing to use if you have to use it. I remember Firefox at one time was thinking about automatically clicking that for you, that you could say in Firefox, I will always say like I don't want any cookies at all. And it would click the button, these consent things automatically for you. It's interesting, though. Yeah. Are you using something internally that you built yourself on your products, or are you using a third-party thing for that?
Well, in the insurance company, we use something that's built in-house by a totally different team. But if I build something myself for clients and stuff like that, I try to avoid cookies at all. Like using plausible I/O for analytics instead of Google Analytics. If we have YouTube videos, use the no cookie URL for that and stuff like that. Yeah, keep it lightweight. But I hate those cookie consent things. Like, we have 4,621 legitimate partners that want access to all your data. It's like, what? And then you have to, they're all selected, and you have to deselect them by hand. It's insane. So if I can help it, I try to avoid using cookies because I really don't think it's necessary for the things I build.
And they're never localized. I mean, in the UK, they should be biscuit banners rather than cookies.
Too right. Too right. And I wonder, like, when it says a lightweight and GDPR compliant cookie consent, surely you need to sort of customize that depending on what it is you're collecting and what cookies you've got. Is it? I assume it's just like a boilerplate to get you started. It's not something that you sort of bring in and then you can't edit.
True. You can add some data and some explanations in what kind of cookies or how they're named and what you where you use it for. They have a nice demo as well.
Flexbox Playground. I still think it's interesting that people want that, but I think it's really cool to explain a CSS feature in such a gamey manner. Like there was also the one with the turtles back then. There was a game, Flexbox Turtle or something, where you had to solve
something with Froggy, I think.
Yeah,
Flexbox
Froggy. Yeah, it was grid. Yeah, anyways, like it's always cool for people to do these things. I also love that in the browser that it's built in. That basically when you select something that has a flex in it, you have these things down here. Where you can basically see the different parts. And I admit freely, I use that all the time because I can't remember all the syntax of Flexbox as well. So
A Flexbox is it's more or less muscle memory for me now, but CSS Grid, I still have to look up things like how does this work again.
It's also interesting, Chris, that you say, like, I freely admit, as if we're sort of like slightly embarrassed when we don't write things by hand. You know, it's like, it's because again, you know, if it was sort of something else, you'd say, oh, well, I took the shortcut because it was fine. Yeah, you know, and especially when I see the actual the dev tools there, all the icons are the same if I'm using Premiere Pro, After Effects, Illustrator, Photoshop, and I do not think I should have lined that up by hand. You know, I just think click the button, it works. It's just an interesting one how we kind of punish ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's also that when you come from the old world of the internets, you actually the naming of CSS is sometimes confusing. You got like vertical align in like table cells, for example, but there is no vertical align in Flexbox. It's basically justify content and align items. So there's no vertical at all anywhere. So it feels like undoing knowledge from the past is harder than actually doing that. Next, that was a Microsoft product, I think it's that. That's actually pretty nice. You can actually have CSV files and you can turn them into graphs and all kind of stuff directly on your device without actually having to go through any of the whatever it's called, or like visualization libraries out there. So it's a pretty cool way to, if you want to impress people with graphs, to actually just get your CSV files on your own device and start showing people that one. Nice thing, open source from Microsoft, why not? CSV is great, but TSV I thought is even cooler, like the tab separated content, because comma separated values is like you always have to quote the commas in other values, so it feels like dirtier.
And depending on where you on which version of Excel you export, is either comma separated or semicolon separated, so you get those issues as well.
Pages does the tab separation on the Mac one, so that's where I found that as well. I didn't even know that was a thing. There's a list of Hacker News undocumented features and behaviors. I haven't looked into that. Dan, have you taken a peek at that? Because it seems like there is a whole subculture of people trying to find out what Hacker News can do for them.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. It's these it's a bit like Reddit in a way, you know, where you sort of get these whole communities that have lived on there for a very long time, and then these people have done these things, you know, because they're spending so much time on there. I think it's interesting, but I sort of, when I look at some of the features, they're a bit strange. I don't know. The flame war detector was an unusual one. I sort of read a quick look at that. But I think it's really cool though that there are people doing this. You know, it's like we talked before, like Chris, earlier this week, about how we love Easter eggs in things, whether it's films, and I think that's quite fun, and that makes you want to go on there and see what you can find. So it's nice. It's good they put it on a GitHub repo as well. Oh yeah, exactly.
That's
fine. Google still has that do a barrel roll, and Android still has the thing where when you say Lumos and Nox, it actually turns on the light and turns it off, like it's the Harry Potter thing. That's actually still on Android as well. So you can turn an Android phone that you can turn on the lights by saying Lumos and Nox to turn it off.
If you search Comic Sans in Google, you'll now see your Google search results in Comic Sans. So that's a nice touch.
No, actually, it was like, wasn't it GeoCities?
Oh, that's another one. Yeah, I saw that this morning, actually. Yeah, look at that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Blast from the past.
Yeah. So that's quite fun. This one I talked about in a tweet the other day, and a toot and in all the other platforms. And that's just mental. You can actually turn a hide text into an emoji because it's what do you call it? Basically like a fav icon and other things as well. It's a container format. So basically in the UTF-8 characters, you can hide other characters in there, and that allows you to hide a message in an emoji. It just shows that emoji are a terrible idea, because the security implications of that, you can actually have all kind of payload that you have in one emoji without the end user seeing it.
But can it be malicious? That was what I was wondering.
It ends with that, and I know from my stint in the security world, if there's any way to inject something anywhere, then it can be malicious. People will find a way to make it malicious. But yeah, it's really geeky and wonderful to actually. And there's an encoder where you can just do it yourself. And a few people put it into tweets, and I think it filtered it out again, or I'm not quite sure what happened there. But it's a really, really interesting thing that, yeah, it's basically several characters in one, and some invisible ones you can put in there. So interesting to see.
Yeah, it can be your own secret language, like you used to have as a kid, for instance.
Yeah,
sending messages like that.
I mean, stegography is the term for it, and it comes from from old Greece, where they had these like wax plates where they wrote things on it, and they wrote things on the back of it. So that's basically you had to turn it around to get the real message, kind of thing. So that's where it came from. So it's interesting. This is something that Dan and me have to deal with a lot lately. There's I call it the Tux Speedman AI generated text. Because like when you do like any system out there and you use any of the chat GPTs or stuff, and you tell them to actually convert a video into a blog post, it starts with that thing like, as I said, it's called like a bad Hollywood trailer. In the fast-paced world of technology, it can be tough to find the right allies. So-and-so is here to help. And it just drives me nuts how much crap I see these days that actually are so over the top. And that's always generated stuff from AI. It makes you wonder, like, I mean, I will write about this, like, where does the world of content generators go? Like, if we generate this stuff using AI and we send it out there and it's just so it actually can be found by AI bots better and indexed better, we're not generating content for humans. We're generating content for the machine that we use to generate the things. It feels very wasteful and weird.
Yeah,
I think there's an issue as well with people community. It's like LinkedIn is kind of turning into just AI posts speaking to other AI posts, because I saw something the other day. Somebody had posted something that was very clearly not them. It was basically, they'd obviously said to ChatGPT, write something that's slightly rage baity and it's going to annoy people and get engagement. And then the response was somebody where you could tell the AI had kind of misunderstood it and was responding to go like, congratulations, this is amazing. And it made no connection. And somebody else had posted something, I think, about someone saying, I've joined a family, I've joined a company, and then somebody else saying, congratulations on the birth of your child, because they kind of misinterpret it. Where these AI bots, it just feels like that, doesn't it?
It was about the Apple announcement, because that ad was like, there's something new coming to the family. And somebody posted that on LinkedIn, and then somebody answered, yeah, I hope the child is safe and secure, and like all kinds of stuff. Like, so yeah, by the way, this afternoon Apple is announcing things, so probably nobody's going to watch this or actually care about it. I've got insider knowledge. I know it's going to be a phone. It might have a camera, I think, and I hear it's going to have a touch screen.
No, that's too far. We're living in the future.
Wow, jeez.
I mean, am I just being tainted? I mean, I have a 2-year-old iPhone from the company, and I've got a 4-year-old Android, and I'm not on the train anymore that I have to get the newest stuff all the time. How about you?
Same. I think my iPhone is also 2 or 3 years old. I don't even know. And it's like, it's working fine. Why do I need a new one? And, over €1,000, nah, I can spend that on other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at like 1,400 euro for the Samsung, the biggest Samsung phone there is right now, and you can get a MacBook 4 for like 799 at refurb.com. So I'm like, what the hell? Like, since when do mobile phones become more expensive than laptops? The laptop used to be like this cool thing that only a few people can afford, or only the company can give you. But now it's like the phones are more expensive. It's really weird. I love this. This is a transit photo of the day. This is Tottenham Court Road in London, and this is basically showing you the lifts that are available there. And I mean, this is just wonderful.
Yeah, who came up with this?
And now I'm going to geek out because I can. Because he asked, is like, oh, he feels like making a game out of that one. And there is a game that I loved to bits in the past called Impossible Mission on Commodore 64. And somebody actually wrote a JavaScript version of it. So you can actually play the whole game in your browser. And it was really cool because it had like real proper human animation. Like the way he's running looked like really normal. And it's basically a really, really tough game to play. So you can see these robots here, and they basically, when you're too close, and they will actually execute you. And you have these things to get around to find out things about different things in the room. And it's called Impossible Mission because it was really hard to play. But the really fun thing about it is it was harder to play in Europe than it was in America. And there was one reason for it. Can you think what that might be?
Is it play in Europe? It's the layout of the keyboard?
No. It was the frequency of the monitors. Like America had NTSC, which was 60 hertz, and Europe had 50 hertz. Now, writing a game like that on a Commodore 64, you actually went with the interrupt. You know, when you write a game in JavaScript, you have a loop, like you do get next animation frame, these kind of things. And in this case, you had an IRQ. While the screen was being painted, you interrupted it and you did your calculations in there. So American C64s had like 10 lines more than the European ones because they were faster refreshing at 60 hertz. So at one time when that would happen, that happens right now, where the robot is shooting at the wall and you were standing on the other side, you would die. So because the program was written in America and it thought you're in a different line, so it thought the two sprites are actually on top of each other, so it's a collision where it wasn't a collision. Now, the pirated versions were actually rewritten by crackers to actually work on both the 60 hertz and the 50 hertz. So the illegal game you could actually finish and solve, whereas the one that you bought was impossible to actually solve, or really hard to solve in Europe. And I love that, like that nobody bothered in the American company, to ever test this. But it was basically a game that was impossible to play because of the 60 hertz versus 50 hertz kind of thing. So yeah, good thing we don't care about these things anymore. The same when like back in the days with like charging things, your mobile phones, the first mobile phones and stuff, you had to get the right charger or it would overcharge. And these things are all fixed for us nowadays. But this is a really, really fun and tough game if you want to actually spend a few hours in frustration. And it's great that somebody built this there. Rowdy, you are all about music and generating them. So we have a few tools for you that you probably took a look at.
Yes.
I mean, the first one is here, the draw audio, which I found is really, really cute. You just basically do these squares and then you play music with the squares. There was on Super NES, there was a Mario composer at one time, I think, as well, that allowed you to do similar things. How hard it is to build something like that in the browser? And you've done a lot of music stuff. Are the APIs ready for that kind of stuff, or is it still something that we have to hack a lot in JavaScript?
Well, you could use the Web Audio API for that easily, or maybe use Tone.js as a library that's a little bit easier to work with the Web Audio API. But it's the pain here is to get this all working with all the envelopes and the filters and the effects. That's a lot of work to do. I looked into a little bit. I could see some of the code of it, and it's really nifty. It's well done. If I look at my own sequencer I use for half-stack, for instance, for my demo, it's like, this is way more complicated than what I did. So it triggers me to look into this stuff more as well. It's very, very nice. But you did waste in a good way my evening last night, Chris, with these links, because oh man, I went wild, especially with this one, because this one is loosely based on Sonic Pi. I don't know if you remember that one.
Nope.
That's also computer. You give instructions as well. You can download it on your Mac or your Windows. You give instructions and it will play sounds. And I've seen the creator of it at some conference in the 2010s doing this live. Programming live music. It's insane. This is really, really cool as well. And I saw somebody using it's somewhere in the demos as well. That's based on the TB303. And what I like is the 909 for the house music beats, but the 303 was for the acid house, and he created something nice with it as well. It's insane.
Yeah, that was another thing that I just saw where somebody created something for Raspberry Pi to run MIDI natively on it. And it's going to be probably in the newsletter, but it's really bizarre because he got like a lot of backlash for he shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff. And seems like there's a whole subculture that has a different way of dealing with people who actually want to invent things and go the MIDI route as well. It's interesting, like, what is it with Dutch people and MIDI? Like, you do your music thing, and then there was also what's his name right now? HTML5 test. Niels Leenhaar.
Niels, yeah.
Did all the Bluetooth JavaScript talks about it as well. I had to go to different conferences with him and go over borders, and he had like 50 different Bluetooth devices with him. It was always like an extra half hour in security.
Yeah. He inspired me a little bit with that as well. I've been to customs as well, and security is like, okay, can you open your bag, please? Because of all the wires and stuff. It's just fun. Like, it's for me, it's a way to do something different than my day-to-day job, but still work with JavaScript and just see what's around there. And it also gave me my own spot in the conference world. Like, it's more like a niche that's the upside, because it's interesting, it's different, but also it's a little bit of a downside, because it's like, does it really fit the program or not? So I've doing those stuff in, I don't know, .NET, PHP, and Java conferences as well. It's like, who's this guy? But it's fun. It's pushing the boundaries a little bit, and let people see that there's more than just rendering text on a page, for instance, with JavaScript. So it's as I said, Project Fugu is incredibly interesting.
Which part of Fugu is doing audio? Is there a new audio API coming, or is it basically the one that we have right now being refined?
That's more or less done. Yeah, it's same as the MIDI part. But I feel for me it's like showing people what you're capable of with the browser. So there are some things that are still going on there, but support very much differs. Like Safari on iOS. Well, good luck with Bluetooth, for instance. It's never going to be there probably. But I know from Niels, he set up his whole company doing things with web USB, for instance, and web Bluetooth and stuff like that. So there's definitely a business case.
Yeah, and I love that his company is doing like billing systems for hairdressers.
Yeah, correct. And planning.
Yeah, and he's happy doing it. Like, that's the thing. Like, you don't have to be the next Facebook. You don't have to be the next Next.js and stuff. It's just finding your niche and playing with it. I found interesting that it actually creates that it actually parses mod files here.
Yeah, so I saw that as well. Yeah.
Is that the Amiga mod format, or is that standardized anywhere, or what is that?
I have no clue. I just went to look at different mod files as well. I have to dive deeper into this, but yeah, you're ruining my free time, because I also have an electronic drum kit here, and I want to learn Ableton to create music, and now I have to do this again, and it's fun, but it's so much. I need to get some time for this.
I was amazed that there was. I remember back in the days in Winamp, you had like a whole sub-community doing Winamp skins. And in Ableton Live, it's the same thing. There's people that actually build like skins for like 1960s, simulate 1960s reverb machines and all kind of stuff. So it's like there's always a geek sector to it that people don't know about it. It's just gorgeous to see that. Especially as Ableton is not free. It's not an open source thing, but still it's like lots of people creating open source and free and Creative Commons style things on top of it.
I mean, there's producers as well trying to meet in the middle. A close friend of mine is a producer who works from home, makes songs for a publishing company, so they put them on games and films and things. And over the last year, he and about two of his other friends have contacted me and sort of said, how do we get into doing plugins? So they're starting to see now that there's this they can sell them, so it's about turning them into products, but they're all sort of saying, where do we start? And from what I can see, it seems like it's very much over in the world of like C or C#. It's not really being done in JavaScript because of the limitations with sort of being browser based. And so I think it's really interesting when I see what you're doing, Rowdy, because you're actually trying to take things that the code a lot of the time isn't open source. It's hidden in the software itself, the Ableton or Logic or whatever it is. And then you're having to try and recreate it with JavaScript when there isn't really like a path that says, just use this, or here's a library you can learn from. Seems like you're having to do a lot of figuring it out.
Yeah, true. I did use, for a lot of demos, I use Tone.js because it makes the world way easier. But yeah, it's fun to look into, but it's also painful. It's at points. Yeah.
So what is your main product in this thing that people can play with?
It's Beats in the browser. It should be, there it is, the third one. There one. It's also, you can download it and install it yourself, but it's also beatsinthebrowser.nl is live as well.
I was just thinking, you really went all in the documentation and you read me there. Well done.
Yeah. It's like, I build it for myself. I build it for demos, and it's like, okay, I can just make it public. That's fine. Yeah, the sequencer here is the most important one.
And I love that you came all branded at the half stack as well. You had like your hoodie and your T-shirt and stickers and everything with it. So
yeah, that's what I try to do for every talk. Have my own branding, have my own style, and just do what I like.
Cool.
Star jumps, including star jumps, if I remember. I've got an edit of that somewhere where you were it was hooking up to your heart rate, wasn't it? And
Correct.
Making the beat all in line. I remember.
Yes, that's for the beats per minute. And I used to run around the venue. I've done it a couple of times until in Sofia in Bulgaria at DevReach I pulled a muscle. And I tried to do something else. So push-ups. I did push-ups, but it's like, that's okay, but it's not fun. So I just bought some skipping ropes with lights in it. It's like, okay, we have another feature. And,
I remember one Smashing Conf I was moderating, and the owner of Smashing Magazine was then doing a planking competition with people on stage and wasted 5 minutes of my time, where I basically had the whole thing planned with every speaker getting that much time. And he's like, oh, no, do a planking competition. I was like, what's going on here? But yeah,
your heart rate will go up as well with planking, I would say.
Yeah, and also just being on stage. I mean, like Niels did that at one thing as well, where you had like a heart rate monitor, and basically then you saw just how much even seasoned speakers get worried on stage, and that's a good thing. Like, I mean, if you are thinking about presenting at events and you see people like us who did like thousands of talks, we still are as afraid as you are. We just don't show it. We just I use that self-cringy thing, or like thinking I'm going to do it wrong, as a Kickstarter for myself. I'm just like, I'm now on stage. Nobody's going to drag me off. So I have the time right now to use it and take that energy and turn it into something that brings the audience in.
Yeah, usually for me, the first few minutes, my heart rate is high. I'm breathing from here, like not relaxed at all, but then just gradually it will be fine. The most important thing is to know your stuff.
Yeah.
And do it as much as you can.
So what's next for you? You do the sequencer talk a lot. Is next going to be VJing or video mixing?
The next one is at a small conference for students in the Netherlands, and that's all about accessibility. I've done that one recently at Sweatek in Stockholm as well. I want to do more about that also because of the European law that's coming in very soon. People need to know what to do and how to fix simple things. And after that, the next one is at Web Expo in Prague. And that's all about Project Fugu. So that's dealing with Web NFC, Web USB, Web Bluetooth, clipboard API, stuff like that. And after that, the schedule is open. So maybe WeAreDevelopers. I don't know. Could be.
Well, CFP is still on this week, so you have to. I think you said something already.
Oh, I've sent 5 or 6. Probably. Yeah.
Don't worry, it's on me then. It's all good. I mean, my PayPal is no.
Chris at WeAreDevelopers.com. Yeah, okay.
No, sadly, no, not.
Okay.
No, and I can't be bribed. I'm too rich and famous for that. Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I'm jealous of Prague because I love that city. It's going to be interesting. I remember one time we had organized an event with Microsoft in Prague, and it turned out that water for the people at the event was actually more expensive than beer. So, so that's basically a very Czech thing, it seems. So that was really interesting to see. If you got time, there is a museum called the Museum of Film Special Effects, and it's under the George Bridge. And it's about a filmmaker from the 1920s that did like all kind of stop motion stuff with dinosaurs and things. And all of the exhibits are interactive, so you can actually play with them and see how he did do these shots back then that still look up to almost natural now. So it's a really beautiful thing to have. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, and I was disappointed by the Kafka Museum because it was just a museum about Kafka. I was expecting it to be an empty room and a guy in a uniform telling me I'm a liar, or or explaining why I exist, or like things like that. But it was just a normal museum.
Yeah, well, that's also the upside of speaking at conferences. I combine this. My girlfriend is coming along with me, and she's going to see me on stage for the first time, so more terrified as well. But we make a holiday out of it. So we go to Prague, and after that we travel to Budapest and then to Vienna, and so we have 2 weeks of nice city trips there as well.
Cool. Well, we're going to be in Vienna on the 18th for the 27th for an event that we have. So you might be able to show around as well, because our office is bang in the center of Vienna. I fly there for a day always. Like, I mean, we got these meetings at the beginning of the month where basically I get out of my house at 4 o'clock in the morning to get the 7 o'clock flight to Vienna, and then come back at the 9 o'clock flight to arrive at midnight in Berlin. And then next morning I tend to have to meet Dan again. So that's always weird. But yeah, I guess we're far out of time again, but we had lots of interesting things to talk about. So hopefully you found some links interesting. You found Rowdy interesting. Take a look at his stuff. He's very much putting documentation on it right after this talk, rather than just having the website where you can play with it. And yeah, thank you, Rowdy, for being here. So anything you want to throw at our audience that you think is important to consider, other than the German elections?
Well, I would say just experiment. Do stuff that you normally don't do on your day-to-day job, and just figure things out and see if it brings you somewhere. Or it will teach you something. So that's important.
Dan, what about you? You're a musician and you're a JavaScript coder, and still I haven't seen anything like that Rowdy does from you. What's going on?
No, I know. Do you know what? Well, I can go back and watch Rowdy's talk because now I know how to build something like that, right? But yeah, I really want to, and I've thought about getting my own samples and putting them in there, and now I can see you can do filters. Yeah, you wait, hold this space. I'll make something. Won't be as good as yours.
You can make a merge request. For
nice. I like it. I love that. Yeah, that's great. It's open source. We should add that. It's open source. There you go. I'm your first contributor. Thank you very much.
I remember Halfstack also had like Earth to Abigail and people like that did like live sampling with code. That was also at Beyond Tellerrand, and that was really, really cool as well. So the audience could actually code along as well and just put like other loops in and things like that. So that's also, if you haven't seen her stuff yet, it's really, really amazing to see. And Halfstack had her a few times, and she was one time at Beyond Tellerrand, I think. So you can take a look at that and find the talks that way. Yeah, but other than that, I think it's time now to refresh our coffees and to send Rowdy back to rolling cheese or whatever you do. Yeah, it's great to have somebody from Gouda here. And I'm just saying, like, pass the Dutch cheese to the left-hand side. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.